NASCAR announces the largest penalty in the sport's history yesterday. Denny Hamlin gets hit with a penalty of his own after his comments on his Actions Detrimental podcast by Dirty Mo Media. And Jimmie Johnson announces the next couple of races he's going to run in his very limited 2023 schedule there at Legacy Motor Club as an owner-driver. We discuss all that and the preview for Atlanta on this installment of The Tunnel Turn, presented by Dogleg Media. Thank you guys so much for joining us again today. My name is Matt. I'm your host. In NASCAR, man, they dropped the hammer on Hendrick Motorsports and Kaulig Racing yesterday, didn't they? A 100 driver point penalty to William Byron, Alex Bowman, Kyle Larson, and Justin Haley, as well as a 10-point playoff deduction for those drivers. Each of those numbers also got a 100-point owners standings penalty, as well as the number 9 car piloted by Chase Elliott and Josh Berry got hit with a 100-point owner penalty as well. Hendrick Motorsports receives the largest monetary fine in NASCAR history as well at $400,000, beating out Michael Waltrip Racing's $300,000 penalty back in 2013. And you're going to see the updated point standings on the top left now. You see there's a new points leader. Kevin Harvick takes over the point lead, 3 points over Ross Chastain. We discussed it in the Phoenix recap. Ross Chastain would be leading these points if it wasn't for what Denny Hamlin did that later got him a penalty as well with NASCAR. We'll discuss that a little bit later on. Alex Bowman drops all the way from 1st to 23rd in the points. He was leading the points after Phoenix, and this penalty really puts him in a bad spot, almost in a must-win to get into the playoffs. Christopher Bell, Ryan Blaney, and Kyle Busch round out your top 5 in the points. Martin Truex Jr., Daniel Suarez, Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, and Chris Buescher round out your top 10 in the points. It's cool to see a couple of RFK guys in the top 10 in points. They had a really tough year last year, albeit Chris Buescher's win at the Bristol Night Race. So it's good to see that turnaround for Brad Keselowski and RFK Racing. In the top right of the screen, though, you're going to see where those Hendrick drivers fall now. As you see, Alex Bowman, he's in 23rd place in the points after leading the points, leading Phoenix. Ironically, this helps Chase Elliott in the points. He moves past his teammates William Byron and Kyle Larson in the points, so after not receiving the 100-point driver penalty, he actually improves his standings in the points. William Byron falls to 29th in the points. Lucky for him, he's got 2 wins. He's already locked into the playoffs. NASCAR got rid of the top 30 rule for winners, so where he's got 2 wins and they were not affected by these penalties, he's locked in. The big story, though, is Kyle Larson. He's in 32nd in the points, and this essentially puts him in must-win territory to make it into the playoffs. I think this is just too large of a deficit for him to turn around and to get into the top 16. And I think I've seen something for the first time ever. Justin Haley, after his 100-point penalty, he has negative 40 points in the standings. Not 40 points behind the leader, not 40 points behind 16th place. He is negative 40 points. He is in the hole 40 points and must climb out of that deficit. So Justin Haley was probably in a must-win before. He's definitely there now. And I don't even know, I've never seen a negative point total before. This is absolutely insane. We discussed Denny Hamlin got a penalty for his comments on Actions Detrimental, a podcast in the Dirty Mo Media Network. Hamlin on his podcast said that he knew his car was going to the back on old tires and he wanted to take Ross Chastain with him. Elton Sawyer, the senior vice president of competition for NASCAR, said that that was in direct violation of the rule book. And because Denny Hamlin decided to make those comments public on his platform, he receives a 25-point and $50,000 penalty for those comments. I say that he receives the penalty because of the comments because that's exactly why he got the penalty. It wasn't the action. It's because he admitted to the action. I've seen a lot of people talk on Twitter. I've heard this debate on SiriusXM this week on whether or not NASCAR drivers should be this open and honest about the actions that happen on the track. In my opinion, I think that NASCAR drivers, if they want to have a boys have at it mentality, that's perfectly fine. If you want to get a guy back for something that he did earlier in the season or earlier in the race, go for it. But what I don't think is very smart is to air out that you did it on purpose, knowing that that's a direct violation of the rule book. We saw it last year. With William Byron wrecking Denny Hamlin under caution, he admitted to it after the race, and they hit William Byron with a penalty. Denny Hamlin was directly involved in that accident, and he still chose to admit that he did this to Ross on purpose. And Denny Hamlin and Ross Chastain, they've had bad blood for almost a season now, and NASCAR knows that, and I believe this is going to be a scene straight out of Days of Thunder. I think that if Denny Hamlin and Ross Chastain even accidentally touch into each other, there's going to be big fines coming from NASCAR because I don't think they want to play with this incident anymore on the track. Denny Hamlin didn't fall that far in the points. He's down to 12th place, so a 100-point penalty really affected the Hendrick drivers. 25 points, not a huge deal, but it could come back to bite him if he was going to be contending for that regular season title. And speaking of the regular season title, this penalty for Alex Bowman, for William Byron, this could be a 25-point playoff swing by the end of this thing. They lose 10 from the penalty, and there's no way they're getting the regular season title after losing 100 regular season points either. Let's move on to some more positive news. Jimmie Johnson announces his next 2 races on the schedule, and in the top left, you're going to see his new car with a new primary sponsor. That's right, Jimmie Johnson announces that he will be racing at COTA and the Coca-Cola 600 on Memorial Day weekend, and as you can see, he's got a new primary sponsor on the car as well for that Legacy Motor Club 84 machine. Carvana's not the primary sponsor, but it looks like it's got the same colors. Club Wyndham will be the primary sponsor for this car. This will be the sponsor for both of these races, and in typical Jimmie Johnson fashion for the last few years that he's been racing, it's not a very great paint scheme in my opinion. It's a blue base with some teal lettering for Club Wyndham, and I'm not exactly sure what those dots on the car are supposed to represent. Maybe that's something with Club Wyndham, but nevertheless, it's not a great paint scheme in my opinion. Jimmie Johnson drove those iconic Lowe's colors from 2002 to 2017. And then in 2018, he went to the Lowe's for Pros black Chevrolet. I didn't think that was a very great paint scheme, and then I really wasn't a fan of any of his Ally paint schemes. So from 2018 on, I didn't really think that Jimmie Johnson had that great of paint schemes. I loved his Darlington throwback paint scheme. That was a really awesome one where he paid homage to Richard Petty and Dale Earnhardt as the only other 7-time champion. And honestly, I thought his Carvana scheme for Daytona, I thought that was a really clean paint scheme. I loved the colors of it. I loved the color of the 84 on the top of the car, but this paint scheme right here, this just isn't doing it for me. This is kind of going back to those dull paint schemes that Jimmie Johnson had to end out his career as well. Lastly, we'll preview Atlanta a little bit. William Byron won this race last year on the first race for the newly reconfigured Super Speedway. Something to note as well, the pit road entrance is going to be at the entry of turn 3, and you have to maintain pit road speed all the way around. I don't foresee that sticking. I'm going to be at the track this weekend. I'll let you know if that sticks, how stupid it looks, but in my opinion, I think that's the dumbest thing that I've heard from NASCAR in a long time. At the speeds of this track now, if you enter pit road speed at 60 miles an hour in turn 3, you're going to go 3 laps down easily, and that's probably without a stop. So I don't know what NASCAR's thinking. I don't know if they had super big issues with entering pit road at a normal place last year with this race, but entering in turn 3 and maintaining pit road speed all the way around just seems totally just ignorant to me. It's going to be super interesting to see how that works out, but if your driver has to make a green flag stop for any reason, they're pretty much done. I just don't see any other way for them to be able to recover from having to enter in turn 3 for that. But that's enough about my soapbox there as well. William Byron won this race last year. Chase Elliott won the summer race. Obviously, he won't be competing at his hometown track. Josh Berry will be filling in. He got a top 10 last week at Phoenix. So it'll be interesting to see what Josh Berry can do in that number 9 Napa Chevrolet. Like I said, I will be in attendance at this race. I'm going to be vlogging. I'm going to be bringing you guys with me. I'm going to put all this content out hopefully on Tuesday when we get back from our trip. But let me know in the comments, guys. Let me know about these penalties. Do you think it was justified for Denny Hamlin to get a 25-point penalty for admitting to what he did? Do you think that Hendrick Motorsports deserved as big of a penalty as they did? You got to think, those louvers were not on the car. They got confiscated Saturday before the qualifying session. Hendrick is appealing it, but they're not going to be sending their crew chiefs to Atlanta. In my opinion, that's just like saying, hey, I'm not guilty, but I'll go ahead and pay the fine. I don't know why they wouldn't send their crew chiefs if they're going to appeal the penalty. Hendrick said that the louvers were not on the car. They did not affect performance. They were confiscated even before the qualifying session. The parts found on RFK and front row last year that resulted in these penalties were found in post-race, so they did affect the outcome of the race. Hendrick said that the parts came from the manufacturer and didn't fit the car, so they had to manipulate them in a way that they could, and that's another one of Hendrick's defenses in this appeal. Let me know in the comments, are you team Hendrick? Do you think this was too rough of a penalty, or do you think it's right on point with what they did last year with this modification of next-gen parts? But that'll wrap it up for us here, guys. Like I said, I'll be at the track this weekend. I'm going to get some great content for you. I appreciate every single one of you guys for continuing to support us. If you like this video, consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. But until next time, guys, I'm Matt, your host. You're exiting the tunnel turn, presented by Dogleg Media.